Good evening. Hopefully everybody's having a good weekend here. It's Saturday, March 3rd, and we don't have a whole lot of weather going on. The picture from the drone showing stratocumulus up at about 5,000 feet there, and a bit of a hazy look to the sky, so that probably indicates some trajectories coming from around Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, and up north. So anyway, let's head to the charts. And you can see that the Gulf is definitely not open this evening. And if we follow that trajectory around, and I haven't even looked at the charts, so we can see, yeah, it's coming from that region right there. And this is a huge production region of sulfites and sulfates and nitrates. That tends to be very hygroscopic, and you don't need the air to condense all the way. It just has to reach what's called the deliquescence point, and that can be around maybe 70-80% relative humidity, and then you get sort of a fog forming, and that's what we saw outside on that footage. Now, typically when we have a deeper trajectory coming in from the Gulf of Mexico like that, it tends to be a little bit clearer, unless we get a dust episode coming from Africa. But that's usually a summertime phenomenon. Okay, check of the audio. Let me see here. No complaints. The drone is a Dobby. I forgot the manufacturer, but it's a little $200 drone and seems to do the job okay. No real complaints about it. Anyway, yeah, we've got a cold front, a very strong one, coming through Nevada there, moving into Arizona. And behind it, a little bit of a southwesterly flow. Typically, they do kick around to the western northwest behind these cold fronts. So this is kind of a rare look at something a little bit different, and that's probably because of the depth, the very low pressures there in Nevada. A little bit of snow there around Ely. And out ahead of it, we see the tropical air mass in Arizona, 74 degrees there at Phoenix, and 56 around, what is that town? They got the natural bridge out there. That's about all that I remember. It's been a while since I've been through there. Out on the plains, though, as I mentioned, south flow starting to pick up. Not much of a trajectory from the Gulf at this time. However, in the south, far south Texas, a little bit higher relative humidity with more of a fetch from the Gulf of Mexico there. Okay, taking a look at the charts. Let's see. Had my graphics up. Yeah, there they are. Yeah, SPC, I got a question last night about SPC's analysis charts. I don't know how many people use that, but if you go to their experimental page, which is located at this link right here, spc.noaa.gov/exper, they've got these upper air charts. And there they are. You've got either analyzed maps, which look kind of like that right there, got the lines and everything, or you can select printed unanalyzed maps and analyze them like the forecasters there. So the question I had last night was, with these station plots, what values we're looking at. Let me zoom in on this real quick. We're looking at a 500 millibar chart for Texas for, let me see if that's current or not. Yeah, this is current data a couple hours ago. So you can see we've got the usual temperature. This is minus 49.7, so that's obviously going to be dew point, not dew point depression. However, we've got these other numbers over here on the right side, and that confuses quite a few people there. What this is the change, the 12-hour change of the data on the opposite side. So here at Dallas, let me give you a different example. There at Oklahoma City, this is a change in tens. It dropped 10 decameters there, or 10 meters. So that gives you the change right there. And there's the temperature change located right there. It's went up 1 degree, and the dew point has fallen off by 5 degrees Celsius. Some of the plots, they also have a number at the very top. Yeah, like this one right here. No, that's, let me see if I can find it. That number there is actually at the top right, so it does get a little bit confusing. Checking around for a number at the top. Yeah, there's one at Medford. See this 5 here? That indicates a 5-degree dew point depression, and that only appears when your dew point depression is 5 or less. And that generally indicates the presence of clouds. So if you had a 4, that's not a 4, that's at the top right. Yeah, this 3 here up in Edmonton, that's going to be about a relative humidity of about 80 or 90%, so a good chance of clouds at that level. And then there's a value right in the very center there. Let me try to, yeah, right there. That's the wind speed in knots. Okay, so yeah, that's definitely worth running, playing back if you missed it, because this data does not exist on their website, believe it or not. Okay, we've got the live cam up there, so we're looking at charts, and let's head into the rest of them there. Yeah, I got some rain moving onshore back behind that front. Remember, the front is right in that area here. So this is classic anafront rain right there, and actually some of it is cold core convection there around the San Joaquin Valley. So we'll zoom in a little bit and check out California. And they are definitely getting some of that shower activity back there behind the front, and the front itself located pretty much right there. Let's see if that velocity tensor magnitude gives us frontal positions. I typically like looking at that just to kind of see what it shows. And yeah, this kind of follows a little bit where the front is right there. We can see that it's probably not out ahead in Arizona. Very little response to the wind field. And there's some sort of very strong boundary up north. So we've probably brought in some colder air from up in Idaho and Oregon. And that little boundary right there is supported by this gradient of red lines. So there's 5, almost 6 lines between there and the passes right there, Tehachapi, or not sure how that's pronounced there. Anyway, yeah, so very strong gradient back behind that front, and that puts the front definitely right there because you want to be on the warm side of that gradient. All right, moving ahead, we'll take a look at the INSEP graphic and pull up the 1,000 through 500 millibar thickness. And that gives us this chart. So a lot of the strong temperature contrast, basically between Fresno and maybe Daggett, Barstow. So again, this kind of reinforces support for the front out there in the eastern California deserts. And then the rest of it just kind of continues on. Maybe something like that. Do that a little bit more neatly. So that's going to be the warm front there from about North Platte down to Chanute, Kansas. And then that connects back up to the system, kind of like that right there. So south of that, lots of tropical air all the way down to the Gulf. And then back over Florida, we pick up probably the tail end of the system, maybe something like that right there. So this is all tropical air. And this is all old polar air. All right, cold core low starting to move onshore onto the coast, so that's going to be crossing the Rockies over the next 24 hours. That's pretty much a given right there. Might as well take a look at the southwestern U.S. on the regional charts. Okay, this is how it looked this morning. Very tough to find that front in this data. However, we see some very strong west-southwest winds there, which is kind of abnormal. And typically with that strong westerly component, that suggests kind of a post-frontal wind field there. And it's kind of weird seeing the winds not running out of the northwest down the San Joaquin Valley. So a little bit of an abnormal appearance to that front. And then during the day today it looked like this. That brings us to evening right around this time right here. And then we're seeing the front pushing in Arizona right around this time tomorrow morning, around 6 a.m. or so. So probably sitting about right here. And you can see how it really cools off there in the deserts. A lot of the peaks dropping down to about 0, and the valleys down to about 30 degrees or so. And then moving through the rest of the charts, now you can see tomorrow northwesterly flow finally appears, and we have a cold air mass moving there into Arizona. And that brings us to the Great Plains, where we're looking at a risk of thunderstorms around the Caprock area tomorrow. Probably a few chasers trying to get out and dust out the equipment there. Let's see how it looks today. Warm up today, 60s and 70s. It was pretty warm out there, and you can see the effects of the downslope in the Texas Panhandle out to the southwestern Kansas region. Some areas getting up close to 80 degrees. Cool down this evening, very weak cool down. Still hanging on to 60s and some 50s there. However, we're going to expect to see the low-level jet start cranking up here. Taking a look at the dawn conditions. Winds gusting up to 15-20 miles an hour in Oklahoma. However, one thing that's kind of concerning as far as, well, that's kind of a subjective term. One thing that's kind of detrimental to severe weather is this strong easterly component. I mean, we should really not be seeing that on a storm day. So there's probably a lot of infusion of cold air still plaguing parts of Oklahoma and Kansas, and that could be a factor by afternoon. Then as we get warm up, we start looking for the dry line position. There's 16Z, that's going to be about 10 in the morning. This is a temperature chart, so we can't necessarily find the dry line, but I'm just going to take a guess. I'm going to look at the wind field convergence right there. So probably right on the Caprock. And then by evening, the chart is looking like this right here. So I think there's a fairly high probability of a dry line from around Shamrock, Wellington, down to about Childress, down to Abilene, and all the way down to, I guess, around Langtree, Texas. Now, there is one other boundary we're missing, the cold front. Well, we have a temperature chart up, so that shouldn't be too hard. So we basically go from the dry line westward. So what do we see here? We see very warm conditions behind the dry line. So this is going to be post-dry line air mass. But we see it start falling off around Amarillo. So that's indicative of a cold front moving through that area. And I might place that somewhere in here, because all of the dry sectors should be fairly warm. And when we see these light orange colors, 70 degrees, that's going to be back behind a cold front there. And another thing that's kind of noteworthy, if you go up to southeastern Colorado, southwestern Kansas, we've got flow out of the south. A lot of times it tends to be out of the north this time of year. So a lot of the low pressure is emerging way up north around Denver and up on the I-70 corridor, probably even further north than that. So we'll take a look at the NAM a little bit later and look at that in more detail. But here's the rest of it. This is Monday morning, and you can see the whole system moving eastward. Looks like the cold front and the forcing moves into Dallas Monday morning And a little bit of a warm-up, but you can actually see the front right here. So it's continuing to push eastward. So yeah, it's pretty typical. Front, hard to find out in the mountains and the high plains, but once it gets into the lower elevations, very easy to find. And there it is, rolling through East Texas during the afternoon on Monday. And behind it, some fairly mild air. Okay, taking a look at the satellite. Let me get that set up here. Okay, got David Holcomb here and Carl Berghoff, Shirley Keast, David Holcomb delivering Papa John's there. Ron Chalfant reporting a nice winter day in Southern California. Light rain and sleet today. Avalanche at Mammoth Mountain. Okay, let's see here. I kind of lost my place because YouTube glitched, but let me see. Funwood Tech, Justin Pulliam, Burl H, Sue M, hello to you all. Adam Davis talking about the SPC upper air charts, not just for looking at current data, but to study days he chased also. Okay, and let's see the rest of the chat. Carl Berghoff sharing the Iowa State link. And I think I got all the chat messages there. Okay. So back into the graphics there. Wow, not much to see here. You can see the upper air system out there in the western U.S. definitely, and some of the jet stream banding from Wyoming down to Utah and down to the frontal zone in California. But out ahead of that, some fairly clear air, and it looks like we pick up the subtropical jet right there over Texas. So we're going to probably look for that feature there. I guess we can take a look at a sounding. I don't know if that's current. Okay, yeah, forward sounding for this evening. This is showing that the humidity has definitely come up, and you can see a very close temperature dew point depression there. And that's, we can pretty much correlate that to altitude. So we follow that over, and that's about 840 millibars. That's going to be right around 6,000 feet or so. So that's going to be our stratocumulus layer, and that's spreading out beneath this inversion right there. And above that, some more moisture, and that's forming the other layers that we saw on the webcast tonight. And jet stream winds, 115 knots up there at about 40,000 feet. And we'll take a look at one other sounding. Let's try San Diego. So we know that they're back behind the cold front. Very humid column all the way up to 8,000 feet there. Lots of dry air above that. And then we pick up some cirriform clouds at higher elevations there. So very, very stable air except for the lower atmosphere. So there's probably a little modification taking place there at San Diego, and probably some cloud in that area too. So we got a bit of a storm day coming up tomorrow. Let's check out the NAM graphic. Starting out tomorrow morning, it's going to be looking like this right here. You see that little area of precipitation breaking out. Probably a little shortwave energy coming through. You can see it starts over Dallas-Fort Worth later tonight around 10 p.m. to midnight. This is all very high elevated convection, but sometimes that can modulate the storm environment. And you can see that departing off into Arkansas and breaking up. It looks like a little more around noon. So that tells me we're probably going to see a little bit of maybe broken layers, possibly. Little altocumulus and cirrus up there with that. So cloud material could be a factor tomorrow, and that could complicate using the satellite imagery. Troughing there along the cap rock, that's probably going to be the dry line. And somewhere in here, probably the cold front coming into the Texas Panhandle. You can see the main low way up there in Kansas. So we're probably going to be in the vicinity of that subtropical jet tomorrow. Okay, let's check out the rest of the charts. There's a few others we can look at. Relative vorticity, anticyclonic ridging across Texas overnight. And you can see one of those first short waves moving into the area. This is going to be about midnight right here. So this indicates some ascent over North Texas there. And then overnight, looks like maybe a couple of weak short waves moving through the flow. Tomorrow, looks like we're under a bit of ridging early on. And then we can see out west, this is probably the next short wave coming into West Texas. So there's going to be some lift likely ahead of that. And with the lift, we're talking about eroding any capping inversions and increasing the lapse rates. And the main area of lift crosses over North Texas overnight tomorrow. Where's the jet stream? Well, that's actually pretty easy to find. We look for channeled vorticity flow and also a very tight packing of the height contours. So if you go up north, this is where we have the tightest packing of the contours and the channeling right there. So on one side we have very high values, orange, and on the other side very low grayish and light yellow values. So that puts the jet stream tomorrow night in this area right here. And then the subtropical jet, we don't have enough data at 500 millibars to figure that out, but most likely it's going to be in this area tomorrow. Other charts, temperature. We looked a little bit at this on the other charts, but starting out the day tomorrow, it looks like this. And then by afternoon, you can see what looks like the dry line right there. This is going to be a 3 p.m. analysis, or 3 p.m. forecast. So on one side, behind the dry line, we see very high temperatures up to about 85 degrees, maybe a few 90s there along the cap rock. And then on the other side, we see cloudy, moist air. And also the moist air is slower to warm up. So in this area here, we see mostly mid-60s. That's what the NAM is going for there. And then on the other side, cold front coming into West Texas there. And as you go west towards Santa Fe, you get into some much cooler air. And then eventually the cold front, there it is, showing up and moves into East Texas tomorrow or Monday afternoon. We can look at storm relative helicity too and kind of see where the shear is shaping up tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon looking like this right here. Definitely very high values up in Oklahoma and Kansas, but that's not going to do any good if we don't have any instability and deep convection. So we have to look at the instability fields. And I pulled up one. It was the, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, the lapse rate right there. There's how it looks tomorrow at 21Z. The highest lapse rates, the most potential for instability, south of the Red River. So the instability and the shear are just not very well coupled here. However, that gives us a kind of a good starting point for chasing. A lot of people tend to split the difference there and adjust as needed. So the Red River maybe west of Wichita Falls, looking good for tomorrow. And another chart we can look at is the significant tornado parameter. And it's not just the values that we're looking at, it's the patterns it shows, because this is kind of a combination of shear and instability and bulk wind difference and a bunch of other stuff. And I've noticed sometimes boundaries show up, especially on the high resolution rapid refresh. Like right here, there appears to be something there. It could be an old, maybe a bit of a warm front, or maybe the nose of a deeper moist surge. That could be significant because maybe you can get some baroclinicity along that boundary. So 21Z, 3 p.m., it's looking like this, and they're putting the best potential for deep convection around Seymour and Throckmorton. And then 0Z, it looks like a little bit more breaking out around Vernon and further north towards Elk City. So I guess 287 west of Wichita Falls is kind of an obvious starting target for tomorrow. All right, yeah, the last factor we can look at, dew point. Zero drop frames, I like that. Yeah, you see this? That's what we're looking for right there, zero drop frames. The other night we had something like 1,500, and that definitely wasn't very good. All right, the greens, dark greens, 50s dew points, the blues, 60s dew points, and then the purple, 70s dew points. It's pretty simple. So tomorrow afternoon, the moisture flows northward, 60s dew points come north, but this could be some fairly shallow moisture. And then by dusk, it's looking like this. We've only gotten up to the low to mid 60s. And let's check out a sounding around Vernon tomorrow evening. Some fairly good moisture up to about 1,500 feet. Then you can see it kind of falling off there. And there's that cap. So this is going to be a close one for sure, and above that looks like some very skinny cape there. So this is probably not going to be like a big tornado day, anything like that. However, the atmosphere is trying there, and we definitely have some shear. You can see that on the photograph right there. So, you know, it doesn't take much to really shape this. A little bit more turning of the winds from the surface up to 1 kilometer. I can really chisel out some good storm autophilicity there. So, you know, we'll just have to see and find out how the ingredients come together. All right, we'll go ahead and look at the rest of the pattern. If I can find where the charts are. I moved things around trying to fit in the NAM data, so here we go. There's that system there in Southern California, and then over the next 24 hours that'll move into the Rockies. It looks like by midday it's actually the GFS still going for a very west position. It looks like it's going through Albuquerque around noon, so it actually may arrive there in the Panhandle a little bit late. So by 0Z, it's looking like that right there. Possibly the cold front all the way back near Tucumcari, and of course the dry line out ahead of that. And it looked like the GFS itself tried to break out a little convection in Oklahoma there, somewhere around I-40 or southward towards the Red River. Okay, then for tomorrow night, front is lagging a little bit. GFS doesn't bring it into East Texas until during the day on Monday. Pretty well-developed system up there in the Dakotas, and looks like a little bit of a blizzard going on in that region. And then we end up with kind of an occluded low in the main baroclinic system. That's going to be well off to the south, way down there, and then the rest of it is going to be an occluded system like that. So this is really where we have to watch, and that's heading for the northeast U.S. there. Coming in behind the cold front, a 1034 millibar high. Not particularly strong. A little bit of storm activity Tuesday in the southeast U.S. Looks like that wave does not develop. So it looks like a fairly benign pattern for midweek. And then we see the upper level low start moving across the Midwest into the northeast U.S. right there. High pressure comes in behind, 1035 millibar high, cold air advection coming in. So it looks like things cool down across the central U.S. And then we start gearing up for next week. You can see the return flow is starting to get set up Thursday night and Friday. And this moisture fetch looks a little bit deeper there. So we may be priming up a little bit better for some severe weather. And there you can see it breaking out. Oklahoma for Saturday. The flow does turn a little bit more southwesterly, so this is indicative of maybe a system in the western Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma region. The famous chainsaw chase. And then in behind it, a fairly stout front pushing southward. Yeah, this really develops pretty good by Saturday night there, according to the GFS. And behind it, some very good cold air advection coming in behind. So things move out into the Mississippi River Valley and Tennessee and Alabama. And 528 thickness appearing. I don't think the models were showing that yesterday, so I have to keep an eye on that. We got the 540 line coming all the way down to Dallas, so it looks like winter is not quite over. And that's not too surprising. As I mentioned the other night, we can easily get snowstorms all the way up to May in the Texas Panhandle there, and very cold weather even further south. Yeah, that 540 line comes south and looks like a little chunk of maybe an upper level low coming southward. And a system for the East Coast there on the 12th. And then we look out to the west again. A couple of systems coming on shore. Here comes another one. This is on the 15th. Crosses the Rockies and then emerges out into the plains. And haven't had any really deep moisture return. In fact, you can see here on Thursday the winds are out of the southwest. Thursday the 15th, the winds are out of the southwest. So that's very bad for moisture return. So by the time that front comes out, no precip. Maybe a little bit there on Sunday, but this is not very favorable for precip. 300 hours out, so a lot can change between now and then. And this is kind of weird. 1050 millibar high building up in northern British Columbia. So yeah, that'll push south, but we're just going to have to wait and see on that. That's way too far out. But that's probably the first time I've ever seen a high that strong being indicated by the models up there in northern Alberta. Pretty strange. Okay, quick look at the chat there. Waiting for chat to catch up. There we go. CDMA 531, welcome, says doesn't look too great for severe weather here on the Gulf Coast. Thinking about chasing this season, new jobs, gives decent PTO. Yeah, that's always good news. Carl Burkhoff says, remember 2011 didn't pick up till late March. Yeah, 97, it didn't even pick up until May. That was a cold year. Bye to David Holcomb. And thanks for joining Cher Lee, Carl, David, Adam, CD May, and everybody else. Okay, that'll probably do it for me tonight. I appreciate y'all watching the webcast. Let me turn this down so I don't get feedback. And all these knobs and things to keep an eye out for. All right, thanks for watching the webcast, and hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow. Take care and have a good rest of your weekend.